Hey, it's Danny with Words Are Matter. I just got back from a trip to the Pacific Northwest, and I am inspired to talk about mind control, even though I know that that phrase is so loaded and has been so maligned and is often considered like paranoia speak uttered from the mouths of conspiracy theorists. And there is programming going on that is stealing people's sovereignty and that is engineering our culture. And I think it's really, really important. I know it's really important for us to talk about it. It was so thick in Seattle, and I could see its direct tie to a lot of angry people identified as social justice warriors spreading division under the guise of virtue. And it's time to course correct. So I'm talking about it. Okay, cool. So there's a lot of signage. Let's see, where to even start with this? Let me start with a caption I wrote to go along with an Instagram video that I posted today because it's an overview of mind control. So we'll start there, and then I will go through some of the specific pieces of mind control programming that I saw in Seattle. I took pictures, I'll post those. So that's a lay of the land. That's how our video is going to go today. So as far as what I wrote today, how to know if you're under the influence of mind control and how to hack it. Here's how mind control works. Linguistic triggers and viruses are embedded in language being used to drive an agenda, to deceive, to indoctrinate, to divide, and mostly to activate fear. We can tell that we are under the influence of these forces when what would otherwise be a civil exchange about ideas and policy and analysis of various aspects of the sham show that is our current political lunacy inspires exaggerated emotional responses and has us projecting all sorts of illogical, dehumanizing dialectics, conclusions, ad hominems, labels, and nonsense onto friends and family whom we actually know by experience are not the things we are being programmed to believe that they must be, because the programming is attempting to link behaviors and choices and opinions with slanderous and reductive and libelous character assassination delineations that simply are not true. Not all Republicans are racists or misogynists or white supremacists. These types of things where someone makes a choice to vote for something and then the programming has us linking those choices with these awful identities, that's mind control. That's propaganda, right? So I'm just attuning us. This means that if you're talking to a heart-centered healer who says they like the guy in the Oval's baller move to ban mandatory vaccinations for government employees, and your blood starts to boil and your heartbeat starts to race, and you find yourself accusing them of being a white supremacist, then you, my friend, are A, way off base, and B, under the influence of mind control. The linguistic viruses that are utilized to control public perception attach themselves to unintegrated trauma in our psyches. This is why the emotions spike so strongly. These lexicon pathogens are triggering real-deal trauma bundles from our past, which is what is fueling all the outrage and divisiveness that we're seeing now. What this means is that the way to free our minds and to not succumb to the programming attempting to divide us is to heal our own traumas, to do the courageous, heroic work of looking our demons in the eyes and feeling the feelings they're holding for us, and to accept them and be with them and love them and thank them for all the lessons and treasures they have to share. Okay, so that's the basic gist of what I posted today, which gives us an overview of how the mind control mechanisms are working right now. So, talking about what I specifically saw in Seattle, which was, I just want to say, like, I experienced it as this very aggressive social justice idealism that was like thrust at me with aggression, and I found myself in some really weird, tense conversations with some very angry people who are self-identifying as white and jumping on me for quantum languaging work and telling me that I'm not allowed to share it with people of color because from my position of privilege, I'm not allowed to speak to them. which is completely insane because there's no them, we're all in us, and the laws of creation apply to all of us. So going back to the programming that I'm speaking to now, this image was painted on the door of a thrift store that says "Stand Against Hate." So I've talked about this before. I'm talking about it again. Standing against hate, fighting against inequality. When we position ourselves against anything, we are empowering, strengthening, and fueling those things that we are allegedly against. When we stand against hate, we fuel the construct of hate. We fuel it in our collective frequency bands because we're speaking to it, we're invoking it, we're positioning ourselves against it, right? So if we refer to Dr. David Hawkins' power versus force, force only exacerbates, feeds, and fuels the energies that we're alleging to oppose with force. From an existential level, when my mission is to stand against hate, I therefore need hate to exist, to have a mission, to have a purpose, to have existential validity. So when I define my mission as standing, fighting, being against XYZ, I need XYZ to exist, right? It creates this quantum entanglement that only feeds the energies we're alleging to not be digging. It's really, really ineffective. When we're against anything, we are fueling those things. So instead of standing against hate, it is much more efficient to stand for unity, to stand for love, to stand for peace, to stand for inclusion. So notice that it's not just a slogan, it's a hashtag, it's a movement, right? Okay, so this is being engineered. It doesn't even matter whether we believe it's being engineered or not. It's straight up not effective. To stand against anything is not an effective way to transmute the thing that we're allegedly not digging. That's just how language works. Language invokes the energies of the things. Language strengthens the energy of the things. So all of this is to say, don't stand against anything, and especially not against hate, unless you want more hate. In which you do, please find a different planet, because I don't want to live on a planet where we have more hate. Much smarter to stand for peace, for love, for unity. Okay, so that's example number one. And I'm pointing these out because this signage, these are just a few of the photographs that I snapped. These were everywhere around the Pacific Northwest, which is infecting the psyches of the populace in these subtle and not so subtle ways, and creating a lot of division among our human families. So please, 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 please pay attention. Share this video, share these hacks so that we can make these adjustments hasta pronto-like. Okay, number two. So this was a book that I saw on display at a bookstore. The name of the book is How to Be an Anti-Racist. Guys, I've talked about this before. There's a whole section about it in my book under negative space speak. The subconscious mind is very literal. The subconscious mind does not understand nuance. It does not understand subtleties. It doesn't hear the prefixes and the suffixes that we think are shifting the meaning of these words. That's why I created the word omniscopic to stand for limitless and unlimited, because the mind doesn't hear the un and unlimited or the less and limitless. It just connects to the energies of limit and limitation. Same with how to be an anti-racist. The subconscious mind does not hear the anti. It just locks into racist. I'm not saying that this turns people into racists, but it does feed the larger construct of racism. It feeds the notion of racists, which, you know, that's a label and a character assassination that I'm about to get into. And when we talk about being anti-racist, it feeds the construct of racism. It fuels them and energizes them in the larger frequency bands that are guiding our collective consciousness, and it feeds those constructs. It creates more racism because we're attuned to it. So if someone is learning to be an anti-racist, again, then that person needs racism to exist, to have a mission, to have a purpose, to have a reason for being, to have a self-identity. If I am an anti-anythingist, then I need that thing that I'm anti to exist. It's so inefficient. It's not working. It does the exact opposite. This is programming. This is mind control. So instead of being an anti-racist, let's be pro-humanist. Let's be people who are aligned with unity and with unity consciousness, right? Then we're attuned to what we're living into. We're focused on what we want, And then we're fueling those visions and those worldviews and those collective experiences, humanism, unity, inclusivity, equality, etc. To fuel anti-racism is only to feed racism, it's only to feed division, it's only to tear our human family into more and more fragmented, sucky pieces. So please don't be an anti-racist, don't be an anti-anythingist. Okay, so this last one is a sign that I saw outside of a gay bar. Just so you guys understand, the way that I feel these languaging codes as a word witch is I physically feel them in my body. So before my intellect even has a chance to analyze and figure out where is this inefficient, where is this languaging coding distorted, my body is on alert of like, this is not safe, this is dangerous, this is fragmenting, this is whatever. So when I saw the signage on this bar, my whole nervous system flipped out. It's very aggressive, very violent. So they're saying, we welcome everyone as long as you're not a homophobe, a racist, a bigot. So, okay, so many issues with the signage. First and foremost, to not welcome a bigot to your establishment is bigotry, because the definition of bigotry is intolerance for people who have different ideas. I just think it's so ridiculous, the hypocrisy that I'm seeing for this intolerance that I'm witnessing for people who hold different ideas, beliefs, who are backing different politicians who made different voting choices. That actually is bigotry. Bigger issue with this laundry list of people who are unwelcome, which by the way is just triggering, invoking the energetics of what they're allegedly not wanting or liking or choosing to foster or whatever. What I'm really taking issue with is the labeling, right? So it's not that we're intolerant of bigotry, racism, homophobia, which still is terrible signage to have outside of your establishment. Much better to focus on what your establishment is for and is fostering and is cultivating and is about. Putting that aside, this conflation of behaviors, of our interpretation of behaviors into character maligning labels and identity constructs, right? So it's not that someone has said something homophobic, they're a homophobe. It's not that someone did something that could be construed as racist, they are a racist. This is super dangerous, dehumanizing behavior that I am advocating for us to put an end to immediately. It's super yucky. I'm sure every parent out there has taught their child not to name call, right? It's very small, it's very divisive, it's very reductive, it's very dangerous. And yet I'm seeing a lot of people doing it, a lot of so-called adults doing it in our culture, and it's super yucky. It's doesn't allow for people to grow. It doesn't allow for us to be an evolving species who are still learning lessons, who are still building our character and growing our emotional intelligence and figuring things out. When we put people in these boxes with these labels and these names, they're cages. And those cages and those labels come along with stories and associations that are unkind, are grossly reductive, and allow us to dehumanize one another and commit acts of violence upon one another. It's really, really, really not a cool thing. So, to conclude, this is a small example of the signage that I saw while I was in Seattle, which absolutely explains the rage that I was confronted with on a lot of different occasions. One specifically after like the most beautiful, transcendent Jonesy and Alex concert with an orchestra and a choir that was just so heart expanding and unifying. And then after that, I find myself in a conversation with these women who are so put off by my attunement to language and my choice to empower everyone. So that is the effect this programming is having on people. That's the effect of mind control. And what it does is it attaches, as I explained, to these unintegrated traumas in our psyche, and it triggers them. It inspires these exaggerated emotional responses that are tied to real emotional traumas, but then become conflated with the topics and the propaganda and the linguistic viruses that they're tethered to. And then we're not able to have sane, rational conversations guided by critical thinking about important issues facing our country because these mechanisms are triggering trauma that's on us to transmute. So again, separate conversation. I'm certainly encouraging all of us to do the deep work of transmuting that trauma. And as a transformational coach, I'm more than happy, thrilled, honored to support you through that. And in the meantime, attune yourself and those you love to these languaging distortions, you know, that are rampant in our culture, more rampant I saw in Seattle than here in LA, and yet they really are everywhere. They're certainly coming through our mainstream news. So hopefully this has attuned you to some of the ways that they're working, and a lot of these inefficacies and how they are creating beliefs in our subconscious mind that are fragmenting our human family. So thanks for paying attention, always. Thanks for grokking, educating, integrating, and switching it up accordingly. Thanks for remembering that every word matters, that you are omniscopic amazingness, and for having a rockin' day. Mwah.